Who's running in the 3rd District State Senate's race? The question begs for an answer after Senator Earlene Rogers decides to call it a career after decades of public service. Are the new candidates suited for the position? Dave Spott, Eddie Melton, Ethel Williams, and Darren Washington are all running. So stay with us. This is CounterPoint with Gerard McClendon. Thank you for joining us on CounterPoint. Hey, we want you to join the conversation by calling us at 844-777-9311. Tweet me at GerardMC and send Facebook comments to CounterPoint Gerard. Joining me at the CounterPoint are 3rd District State Senate candidates Dave Spott and Darren Washington. Ethel Williams and Eddie Melton received invitations but were unable to accept the offer at the CounterPoint. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for coming on CounterPoint.
Thanks for having us.
We really appreciate you. You know what? First, let's start with some bios. It's always important for constituents to get to know the people who are on the ballots, right? So let's start with bios. Dave Spott, where do you live now and where did you grow up?
I live in Hobart right now. I grew up in Black Oak section of Gary.
Awesome. What schools did you go to? Elementary, middle, and high school?
Default, which became Grissom, and then Calumet High School.
Awesome, awesome. College?
Purdue Cal.
Excellent. Mr. Washington, where do you live now and where did you grow up?
Live in Gary, Indiana, born and raised there, grew up there. Went to Chase Elementary School, then went to Tolliston, and then graduated from Horseman High School.
So you're a horseman?
Yes.
And after Horseman, you went where?
I went to Millikan University in Decatur, Illinois, and then I also got my master's from Indiana University Northwest in Public Administration, School of Public and Environmental Affairs.
Excellent. So, before I talk about past political experience or your occupational experiences, Mr. Spott, why run for this office? Why this office? Why not mayor somewhere? Why not U.S. Senator? Why 3rd District State Senate?
I believe it's an opportunity to continue the legacy of Senator Rogers. And I wanted to put my hand in the ring to bring that prospect to life.
Good. Mr. Washington, why run for this particular candidacy? You know, there's all sorts of other spots you could run for. Why this one?
The state senate position is very important right now. I bring over 20 years of legislative experience. I was Senator Earlene Rogers' intern. She taught me a lot. I also got a lot of handy points by State Representative Vernon Smith when I was the executive director of the Indiana Commission on the Social Status of Black Males. I also got a chance to see how the legislature works. When Mayor Rudy Clay, the late Rudy Clay, he hired me as the lobbyist for the city of Gary for 2 years. And I got a chance to go to Indianapolis and I saw a lot of things that were going on there. And when Senator Rogers decided to retire and pass the mantle on, I thought this would be a great opportunity to be able to harness some of the experience that I had by going down to Indianapolis.
Good. So, Mr. Spott, let me come back to you. What makes you think that you can pick up the mantle, grab the baton, and keep running for someone who's done great work like Senator Earlene Rogers? Why are you the man?
Well, I believe that I could honor her by doing good for the office and the people of the district.
And what specifically would you do? The state senator in the 3rd district has enormous responsibility. So what might be something that you would place on the table that you would want to continue or that you would want to change?
Well, I definitely would like to reopen the abortion bill. I think it takes us back instead of forward. And it needs to be opened up. Everybody needs to look at it, start debating.
And what is your stance or position on that?
My stance is I believe women have the right to dictate what they want as a child.
Yeah.
I mean, you got your mother's life, you got rape and incest, and you also got genetic abnormalities.
Yeah.
I think they should have that opportunity to decide if they want to take on the hardship of medical costs. I mean, that's going to be outrageous.
But we're in the overly democratic Northwest Indiana in a Republican state. Sometimes it's hard to shoulder up that mantle when you start trying to legislate in Indianapolis.
This is true.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, this is true.
Let's talk about influence, gentlemen. When it comes to 3rd District State Senator, how is the influence different for a state senator than it is for a state representative?
Well,
what's the difference?
Gerard, the thing I want to go back to, about the state senate and why I'm running for that. I mean, you have 100 state senators, you have more state legislators, state representatives. The first thing that we got to understand as a state senator, you are there to represent the people. So I could have a lot of ideas and some things that we'll get into the program, but the area in State Senate District 3 covers Gary, Hobart, Lake Station, New Chicago, Maryville, and parts of Crown Point. The first thing that needs to be done, because many of those areas were severely neglected during the legislative session. Our state legislators make over $55,000 a year for 2.5 months of work. And what I've heard from Hobart, what I've heard from Lake Station, what I've heard from Crown Point is that after the session is done, they don't really have too much communication with their legislators. So Gerard, one of the first things that I'm going to do as I win this election, June 1st, start sitting down with businesses in that district, sitting down with educators, sitting down with law enforcement, sitting down with people to craft a legislative agenda. I have a few ideas, but in order for me to know what Lake Station wants, right now Lake Station has an issue that they may have to sell off their sanitary district. Hobart is looking at a situation in development around Lake George. Gary has issues with economic development. So we need to meet with those city council members. We need to meet with those educators, those businesses, and we need to craft a plan starting June 1st, because in January it's too late.
So you say in January it's too late. Legislators work about 2.5 months, $55,000 salary. Dave Spott, talk to me. Let's talk about education. Let's talk about how can a state representative improve the status of a Gary, Indiana, or a Hobart, Indiana, or a Lake Station? What do you do as state senator to make things better in those communities?
I believe, as for education that you mentioned, education, I believe the I-STEP has outlived its usefulness.
Right,
I believe
it's gone.
It needs to be, removed completely and start from scratch for maybe a state achievement test, just one standard test, and that's it. No more I plus this or social studies or, one standard test, English and math.
Who should choose that standard test? Should it be NWEA, Northwestern Evaluation Association? Should it be something that's somewhat equivalent to the I-STEP, or should we just get rid of standardized testing?
Well, you need a certain point of testing. I mean, you can't just abolish it.
So who should choose that?
Well, I
should
think,
legislators choose it or educators?
Well, I believe it should be a overall conference of both groups getting together, setting up a standardized test for all, and no ifs, ands, or buts.
I like this. Mr. Spott is proposing some sort of symposium, Mr. Washington, dealing with standardized testing. Agree, disagree?
Well, let me say the first thing. I was on the Eric Gary School Board for 8 years, okay? And I was on the board when No Child Left Behind, a mandate by our former President Bush, came in. Great idea, but no funding. Right now, we need to encumber the local superintendents, the unions, the teachers, and we need to get everybody working together. That person in that state senate spot needs to start meeting with superintendents, need to start meeting with board members, need to start meeting with teachers, talking with them about what's the best thing. The biggest problem that we've had in Indianapolis, for instance, the governor just signed a bill to do away with I-STEP testing. But what he also did is he created a 23-member panel board to decide what is going to be the next test. The problem is you have 18 that's going to be Republicans that's going to make that decision. I kind of disagree with Mr. Spott just on a certain extent. The problem with education with the State House is you've had legislators that don't have the background, that don't have the experience, that don't have the teaching experience, the administration experience, making decisions for what our children and our teachers need. What I do agree with Mr. Spott is that we need to hold off until after this governor's election end. Hopefully, John Gregg will get in, because right now, you remember the Supreme Court issue that they don't want President Obama picking a person. See, the Republicans can't have their way in one instance and another. I say wait until the governorship is done, then look at doing that panel. And if you're going to do the panel, make sure on that panel is just not 18 Republicans. Make sure you have educators, make sure you have people that have been in the field. Someone like a Tony Lux, the superintendent of the Maryville Public Schools. Right now, the problem with ISTEP, we have been telling him since Tony Bennett, now Glenda Ritz, we've been telling the governors, you need to do away with that test, because standardized testing, to a certain extent, it unfairly evaluates teachers. Now, teachers need to be held accountable, but not based on the metric of if a child passes or fails a test.
Good. Just see, now we getting into a Charlotte Danielson argument now, and I love this, because what really hurts me as we close this segment out, what really hurts me is when you go from school system, from community to community, and you see this vast disparity of educational resources.
Yes.
It's frustrating. Before we close this segment, Mr. Spot, how do you bring greater resources to communities that are poorer? How do we bring those resources up so that they can be fulfilled?
Well, I believe that the Lake County delegation should get together, hold a few conferences together, and find out what exactly we could do to bring the areas of distress upper. You know, bring them up.
Should we tax more?
I think taxing is overrated.
But
it's
ridiculous. It brings in money, though. And how?
Well, it does. But I think we're taxed to the gills now, and the money's not being funded properly.
Yeah.
It's going to Peter to pay Paul, and then Peter doesn't have the money to give Paul.
So you believe, Mr. Spot, we have to find a better solution as it pertains to the efficiency of the tax dollars that come in, and they need to be spent more wisely.
Absolutely.
You think you can bring that to us as a state senator?
I'll do my best.
This is good. This is good stuff. You know, I'm going to take a break right now. You know, who will you vote for in the primaries? Always exercise your vote. I give you the opportunity each week to voice your concerns, and we, the people. Hey, call my voicemail, 844-777-9311. Tweet me at GerardMC and send Facebook comments to CounterPoint Gerard. We'll be back shortly. Tweet me, post on Instagram, or send me a message on Facebook. Let's start the conversation. Your voice is important on CounterPoint. Welcome back to CounterPoint. The 3rd District Indiana State Senate's race will be a hot one. Senator Earlene Rogers is finalizing her storied career and will turn over the reins over to a new state senator. Joining me are 3rd District State Senate candidates Dave Spott and Darren Washington. Want to just let you know that Ethel Williams and Eddie Melton were unable to accept the offer. Gentlemen, welcome back. We really appreciate you being here today. Before we continue with education and energy, you know, employment, et cetera, let's talk about prior offices that either of you have held. Mr. Spott, what have you held a political office in the past?
No, I haven't.
You haven't? Is this the first time you've ever run for?
Oh, no, I ran back in the 80s.
What offices have you run for?
I ran for mayor, state house, Hobart City Council, Hobart trustee.
Good.
That areas.
And when you run for office, what is your motive? Why are you running for office when you run?
Well, I want to bring back to the community. I mean, we take a lot of things out, but we need to bring back in.
Like what?
Well, more interest in our community, and our surroundings, our environment. We need to get back to that. I like to do that.
Good.
That's why I'm running for the office.
Okay.
That's why I ran through, done offices.
Yeah.
To give back to the community.
So, have you ever thought about just running for one office for several years to gain more traction in that office category to create a greater constituency?
I have, but in my opinion, I don't think that really works if you're trying to beat the incumbent.
Okay. So, okay. Now
See, the incumbent is going to be tough to beat.
It's always tough to beat an incumbent. And Mr. Washington, the two of you gentlemen, Ms. Williams and Mr. Melton, are kind of running against and for a ghost incumbent. That person basically saying, I'm no longer running for this office anymore, Earlene Rogers. It's time to pass the mantle over. But let me talk with you, Mr. Washington. What offices have you run for?
Let me tell you, I ran for the school board. I served on the school board for 8 years. I ran for mayor before, was not successful. Then I ran for state senate, was not successful in that. Then I ran for the Calumet Township Board, and I won that election. Gerard, I have strategically mapped and ordered my steps to make sure that I served in a position that would best serve the voters. I just don't run for positions just to run and to see if I could, get lucky and run. I'm not saying anybody is doing that, but when you have a call to public service on your life, you have to map out a strategy. Being on the school board, we fought with Tony Bennett a lot over education. We fought over vouchers coming into the schools. I was down in Indianapolis during a session for the last 6 years. And so I felt that being a legislator, the ideas that I had, some of the things that I wanted to see done, like for instance, we have a lot of vacant school buildings with the Gary Community School Corporation. One thing that I posed to Senator Luke Kinley, who's over appropriations, and Senator Dennis Cruz, who's over the education committee, was to take those vacant buildings, make it a TIF district, a taxing financing increment district, so the city could be able to partnership with the school district, find monies to knock down. If we could find $500,000 to replace boilers at Roosevelt, we could find money to knock down vacant school buildings so that land could be cleared and then economic development can be ensued. Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson and Cheryl Pruitt and those boards and the councils could get together and make sure that that land can grow economically, and the school district could get a piece of the pie, the city could get a piece of the pie, and therefore we're bringing money into the school district because the district is about $60 million in debt. So we got to look at strategic ways of bringing dollars to the table, looking at certain things like that, because the midnight scrappers have gotten to most of the buildings. They're no good. So if we can get the state or get other entities to say, listen, let's knock down these buildings, and then the city can come together with the schools, and we can bring a great idea to bring economic development. Because Gerard, this is the thing. We talk about education, but when people are working, when people have jobs, when parents have food to put on their table, education takes care of itself. Why? Because that parent is going to be more involved in that child's development because they have food to put on the table, and then they have places to sleep. And so, economic development drives a lot. I think sometimes we get it backwards. We want to focus education, but if we bring jobs and economic development, you bring people into the city and you have people that have a certain particular interest.
Okay, this is good because now we're seeing how education and these jobs are tied together.
They are tied, it's separately tied.
So let me ask the two of you, Mr. Spot, pro or against school vouchers? You think a check should be cut so my child can go to any school that I want my child to go to because the school in my neighborhood is inferior? Pro or anti-vouchers?
I would need further information to give you a rational
That's
decision.
legit, because I'm going to come back to you on a similar question. Mr. Washington, pro or anti-vouchers?
I've had extensive conversation with State Representative Vernon Smith on this. We need to put a moratorium on vouchers right now because Gary has a plethora of charter schools inside Gary right now. You have Theo Bowman that has an issue with their certification. You have other schools, and I'm not saying that they are not providing the education that's needed, but when you look at our community, Gary has over 11 charter schools in the community.
So are you okay? So pro or anti charter school?
Well, I'm pro education because this is the thing, Gerard. A parent has the right to educate their children wherever they go.
School choice.
Right, and I want to make sure wherever they decide to send their children to school, they get the very best education.
Okay, so
having a charter school doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get the best education there, because while you're pulling from the Gary Community School Corporation to go into one of the 11 charter schools, you're pulling from that corporation. That's why I say a moratorium right now. Stop allowing vouchers in Gary, Indiana, because Maryville doesn't allow it, Hobart doesn't allow it. Carmel, Indiana doesn't allow it. We need to stop it to see what's actually working. And let's go back to the I-STEP. And Tony Luck said a perfect thing.
You think it's a cash grab, don't you?
Yeah, hey, to a certain extent it is. And this is what Tony Bennett said. The State Department of Education said, okay, we found out that the I-STEP doesn't work. We're going to give schools 1 year reprieve. No, you need to be at least 3 to 5 years reprieve to be able to catch up from what happened with this I-STEP Plus test. Tony Luck said it perfectly in his articles. So I'm not against charter. I'm pro-education. So if a parent takes their child to charter, Gary Community Schools, the charters, we know about competition. Competition brings lower prices. Competition should allow people to provide the very best education.
That's what charters do.
But you don't saturate it with 11 schools in Gary, Indiana.
Okay, hold tight, Mr. Washington. Mr. Spot, pro or anti charter schools?
I'm not for or against.
Okay, what about pro or anti magnet schools? Selective enrollment.
I do have a problem with that.
What's the problem with it?
Well, I believe that if you're selecting higher individuals that are a little bit more intellect, going to the schools, you're depriving those that don't have the capabilities of going forward.
Good. So let's say my child has the propensity of being mathematically inclined. And there's a school of mathematics that's a magnet school, selective enrollment school, that my child can test into. Should not my child have the opportunity to go to that selective enrollment magnet school that emphasizes a child's mathematical abilities? What do you think?
I believe that children should have the opportunity, but not just single up.
Okay,
one.
See, Mr. Spot brings up a good point.
Yes, he
Mr.
does.
Washington, this is about democracy. He believes in true democracy, the democratization of schooling. What do you say about selective enrollment in magnet schools? And see, this is interesting because you guys are running for state senate, but it's like these schools always dominate the conversation. Because look, if a child gets a different education in Munster, Indiana than they're getting from Hammond, that's problematic. If a child is not having access to computers in a Gary Community School Corporation, but a child in Carmel has access to 3 computers, that's problematic.
Gerard, you got me going crazy right now because you bring up a certain point. You brought up Munster and you brought up Carmel, 2 very economically thriving communities right now. And so therefore there is not a need for a magnet school or a charter school there, because in those school systems, they already have what those children need. One thing that we did when my last year on the Gary School Board, the board gave Dr. Cheryl Pruitt the authorization to create her own charter school within the Gary Community School Corporation. Now you would have to talk to her and Antoine Clemens now, but Gary has that opportunity. But this is the issue. Gary can't be a Carmel or a Munster. Why? Because we need economic development.
Okay.
We need jobs.
Okay, good. So I only have a few minutes left here, gentlemen. Mr. Spot, how do we bring more jobs? How does your role as state senator, how do we bring more jobs to Northwest Indiana?
Well, I believe education is the key point for jobs. If you don't have your high school graduates educated in what's out there, they're not going to be able to get jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, offer classes as basic machining, millwright, industrial electrician, to that nature, blueprint reading, CAD drawing.
Yeah.
I mean, give them the graduates, both male and female, what's out there. Yeah. You know, if they want to pursue an electrical career or machining, journeyman, go to journeyman, give them the opportunity and set up something with Ivy Tech and Gary to, get the ball rolling.
Dave Spot brings up a great point here. vocational education is so difficult to find. You
Oh,
know,
absolutely.
you ask the average 18-year-old that graduates from high school, what can you do? And they look at you like a deer in the headlights. What do you mean, what can I do? You've been in school for the last 12, 13 years and you can't do anything? Darren Washington, I'm almost closing, man, but how do we bring jobs to the region?
Gerard, let me tell you, I'm currently adjunct professor at Ivy Tech, and I teach American government and politics, and I talk to those young people. And I kind of disagree with Mr. Spot to a certain extent, is that when I was on the Gary School Board, I created a corporate roundtable. I talked to representatives from U.S. Steel and other organizations. What is it that you need for as a workforce? The education piece was good, but when you look at the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, about 87% of their members are small businesses with 1,000 or less employees. So what we have to do is we got to make sure that our cities are safe. A safe place for people to be able to come and hold shop in their business. Number two, we got to make sure that we bring competition to the area because that brings the prices lower.
Safety,
competition, and you got to be able to have a marketable plan for each community to show why you can bring future. Let me give you an example.
I gotta cut it short. So those
okay.
are the three things that you think. You think you should be state senator in the 3rd district.
Absolutely.
You think you should be state senator in the 3rd district.
Absolutely.
Man, and it's too bad that the other two candidates had scheduling conflicts, but it's all good because this is about democracy,
Yes.
right? Hey,
Yes.
thanks to my guests, Dave Spott and Darren Washington, for joining me at the CounterPoint. Indiana, you must exercise your right to vote by reading the newspaper, watching public TV, and looking at your ballot carefully. I don't care who you vote for, but vote. If that right was taken away from you, you would beg for it. Thank you for watching CounterPoint. Call my voicemail, 844-777-9311. Tweet me at GerardMC and send Facebook comments to CounterPoint. Gerard, stay positive. I need you to keep your head up and always be encouraged to voice your counterpoint. Have a great week.